Our mission today is to cut out and sew up our quarter circle skirt. So we've already done the pattern and we've already got a waistband. It might be a faux shirred waistband, a shirred waistband, or a soft jersey waistband. And we're going to put it all together today. With a circle skirt or any variation of a circle skirt, we want to place it on the bias. That's from one corner down on the diagonal. So carefully placing it on the bias. I also have a print to worry about, so I'm also going to be careful about where I'm putting my diagonal colours of this type of print that's on my material. If you don't have a print, then you just make sure you place it on the diagonal. Cut around, make sure you put in allowance. I already added my allowance into my hem when I cut my pattern. And that's all there is to it, except that's only half the cut. We have to do the other piece. And we have to have it laid out nice and smooth once again. We have to observe that bias cut line, place the pattern on the diagonal. Now again, I've got to worry about the print. You might not. I've got a red stripe down the front this time. And go ahead and cut that out. Place your other piece back on top and carefully fold it all up because that's going to keep it unstretched for when you sew. You don't want to hang it. Now we already saw in the waistband, I'll put it in the top right corner if you've missed it, that I also had to cut it on the bias to match my print. You won't have to do that if you don't have a print. I've got tiger stripes, directional ones, plus blotches of colour to match in this print. Sewing the side seams is a nice easy job. I've chosen just to overlock. You could do any seam you like. You could do a French seam, or you could just do this on your sewing machine. I would encourage you to finish the edges on the sewing machine with a zigzag stitch before you do the straight stitch of the side seam. Obviously, you'll put that into your allowance when you cut it as well, depending on what machine you're using and what seam type you're using. In order to attach our skirt to our waistband, we of course have to mark the quarters. So that's what I'm doing here. I've got the centre front and the centre back marked with pins, and my side seams are my other quarters. Now when we come to the waistband, you'll find that probably you'll need to do a bit of trimming up to tidy that edge. And if you have a waistband lining, you may not need this step, but if you have a waistband lining, you'll already have pinned that down to keep it in place. Now we're going to make that a little more permanent so that we can do everything that we need to do without that lining shifting around. So it's quite easy. I'm just going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to not do it on an elastic piece, so in a row where there's no elastic. I'm just going to do a tiny little back and forth with my straight stitch. It's a woven fabric, there's no stretch because there's no elastic. So straight stitch is appropriate. Now we are going to space that out, and I always count up my rows so that I'm actually doing it in the same free channel, but we're spacing them out. I'm not doing this continuously all the way around the waistband, and that spacing out means that the whole waistband can still stretch. There's no hindrance to the stretch. It's going to look like this. At the end, you can see my spaced out little stay put stitchings, and that allows that lining to still be free to add anything to. And we've got this lip here. I'm treating this, there's two pieces of fabric here, but I'm treating it as one for the purposes of adding my skirt to it. You could treat it as two if you were sewing a lining onto that without having a lining on your waistband. But I'll use my chiffon fabric and not the lining when I sew my skirt on. Now when we put the waistline of the skirt to the waistband, we may not have that match exactly, and it could be a deliberate design decision. So what do? Well, we can use some gathering to gather the skirt waistline so that it fits the waistband. Now I'm just going to use one row of gathering here, and I've marked the quarters, and I'm only going to do a line of gathering over 1/4. So there's my quarter coming up. I'm carefully just taking my needle over that because I also don't want a dead spot in the center front or center back. So I'm going to go over that, and when I do the next row of gathering, I will start just before that. So I'm always never going to have a dead spot. Now what happens, you look at this back piece of thread and you can pull that, and what happens when you pull the underneath thread is that everything gathers, and you can pull the fabric along that thread and make all the gathers nice and even to your eye. I'm not going to need this much gathering, but you can see why I've only done a quarter line of thread. You could actually do 2 or 3 rows of gathering stitching, and that's more traditional, but I'm not going to need that many for stabilization. I don't need this much gathering either. I'm just showing you what is possible. You might have a design decision where there's a lot of gathering that's needed. I barely had anything, as it turns out. Mine was more of a crimping need, so just slightly pulling it in. But if you'd made a design decision like this, where I'd made the waistline really long to deliberately have it gathered in, well, you can see that I've got far more gathers in the design, and I actually find that really flattering. But as it turns out, I didn't plan lots of gathering here. I'm just going to barely need a little bit of crimping to get it to fit. So we get to putting it into the waistband, and we're going to match up, of course, the center front, center back, and all of our quarter marks, of course. And that will show us exactly how much we have to gather in, if we do it all, that waistline of the skirt. And of course, if you didn't get it quite right to your eyeball, then you've got those threads, those gathering threads, and they're done to the quarters deliberately so that you've got a lot of management over it, and you could easily just pull in the quarters as you go. It's time to sew, and I'm doing this on my overlocker. You could do this on a sewing machine, that's no problems at all. You will obviously have finished off your raw edges before you sew in the skirt to the waistband, and you'll use the straight stitch. But one thing that will be consistent whether you're using an overlock or a sewing machine is if you have got any gathers, you want to have that skirt up. So your waistband's underneath and the skirt bit is on top, and that lets you keep an eye on the gathers and make sure that they're sitting straight so nothing's getting caught up, and also that they're consistent. You don't want to have a clump of gathers and a dead spot. So you're also getting this extra opportunity to check that your gathering is consistent. If you don't have gathers, because you've done a true quarter skirt and you've matched exactly the hang of that circle skirt to the fall of the waistband, then you don't have gathers to worry about. But regardless of what type of skirt and design you have, while you're sewing the skirt to the waistband, we are checking the quarter points, making sure they match up. We're making sure that we are sewing in as straight and as neat a fashion as we can, because we do have rows of elastic in that waistband and we don't really want to go over them. We want to try and keep a consistent line of sewing. That might be right on the elastic, that might be just off the elastic. You have to make that decision. So there's a few things to think about while we're doing this. We're matching quarter points, we're keeping the fabric from bunching, we're also keeping the fabric flat in terms of the waistband because there's no gathers at that seam allowance that we've allowed underneath all of our faux shirring or shirring. So we have to keep that nice and flat. And of course, we have to make sure we are catching both parts, the waistband and the skirt. Nothing worse than missing a section of sewing. And if you're like me and you've got a lining on the waistband, you're also making sure that that's safely tucked up and not getting involved. Right, this can be a bit disappointing, but we do have to check that we got everything right and we didn't like wave like that, like a hump, because we might want to redo things if we have. We want it to be straight, not waving around the waves. And the other thing we obviously need to check from the right side as well, because that'll tell us whether we caught that skirt, might have gone wonky. And it will also be very obvious mistakes from the front. Those are the ones we really want to get away and do again. I've got something here, and that's where my contingency elastic was involved. It's gone a bit lumpy. So I am, and also look, if you've got these little gathering threads, so they just pull straight out. So just pull them out, that's fine. So we're cleaning up as well as checking. I'm going to go to that point there that I noticed it was a bit of a lump. Wasn't particularly well sewn. I think I also missed catching the skirt. So that's okay. We all make mistakes. And it's easy enough to fix. We're just going to go in, mark the place, and we're going to unpick it. Okay, I've got an unpicking video if you want to see how you unpick things very easily. So once it's unpicked, it's just a matter of going back in and making sure you do sew it consistently and nicely. And once I've done that, yes, much happier. It's more of a straight line now, no waving around, and I've still kept my contingency elastic free so I can tighten it up, which will be coming up. You may not have that. And otherwise, I'm quite happy with my join line. It's looking quite good from the front. That last bit of elastic is going to tighten it up and change it a little. I should also say, do subscribe. Now we've got to check the print mat. So I've got this nice sort of continuation of the red down here, while on the front I've got a central green part and I'm framed in the red parts. I will confess I did have to unpick the entire thing and resew it to get a satisfactory print match to my eyes. Whether you had a print to match or you had a nice easy plain sew with plain fabric, everyone has to hang their skirts. That's right. The bias cut means the skirt's going to get longer. And sure enough, look how much longer this skirt grew. I've got a little heel and it's longer. We can't trim the hem until we've hung the skirt. Oh, this will be a disaster. But when we do get to trimming the hem, it can be really, really difficult because we're one person and I don't have someone who's happy to look at my hemline and line it up myself or line it up themselves. I also don't have a mannequin on a pole so I can stand back and get down on the floor and kneel down and actually mark the hemline. So I take quite a few passes to get a hem adjustment to where I'm happy with. My first pass is this rough pass where I have noted how much I need to take it up by. Doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be perfect on my body, but it's my first rough pass. I'm going to just trim it by the measurement that I took all the way around, and then I'm going to give it a sew on my overlocker just to finish the edge. Now what that does, it gives it a little bit more stability because of the type of fabric I've got here. You won't have to do that in order to tell whether you've got a nicely hanging hem, but I did need to do that. Okay, so here I go, just doing an overlocker, finishing off the hem. You will finish your raw edge of your hem, but you will do it when you are happy with the hang. So like I said, I needed to add this little bit of stability because I just breathe and this fabric moves. And this gives it just a little bit more, when I lie it down, because that's what's coming up, it's going to stay put a bit more. It's not just going to ruffle around. And I'm going to have a better go with my second shot of lining things up and making sure the curve's the same, because I don't want the front or the back to be different. So my second pass, and it might be your first pass if you've got a stable and not delicate fabric, is to spread it out on the floor, side seams together, making sure I've got that waistline together because that's going to affect the hem line. And now because I've got it flat on the floor, I can see if there's discrepancies between the front and the back, and I trim it up and I finish it off on the overlocker again and check. Don't rely on looking over your shoulder. It's going to elevate a hip, but do move around because you'll see the swing of uneven material. And likewise, do subscribe. We're almost there. We're going to take it over to the sewing machine and just fold up, if you've overlocked, that overlocked edge. The overlocking gives it a nice crisp bit of fold up. It's very easy, and then you line up your presser foot so that you're sewing a very straight line around the hem. Now you can finish your edge with zigzag and similarly fold it up and hem round with a straight stitch. So it's going to look like this. Very neat. You may plan on doing an alternative hem if you like. There are many available to you. I chose this one because it's very easy. Have you been wondering how I'm going to finish off this contingency bit of elastic? You might have been with me for a couple of videos waiting for this bit. If it's not relevant for you, then of course just skip ahead, but I am going to finish up adjusting. I've had this on my body, and as you can see, I've put a safety pin in to the right length for this elastic now. And all I'm going to do, because I can't get the machine back in there, it's a little tight, I'm going to hand sew through the seam line of that join of the waistband and my elastic to secure it. So nothing revolutionary, I'm just passing my needle in and out, catching some fabric and the elastic. Essentially how we anchored the elastics in the first place to the waistband. We just sewed it a couple of times into the material. Now to finish off the end bit, I've got quite a bit of material, elastic there. Just going to shorten it a bit, enough to fold it back on itself, because I was thinking about doing a knot, and I think I probably could do a knot, but I like things to lie flat against me. I find that far more comfortable. And so I've just going to fold that back on itself, again in and out with the needle, nothing spectacularly difficult, just to secure it. And that's got two lines of defense, I guess, for security. It's also got a little bit of contingency if I needed to let it out. I don't think I will. And if I need to undo and retighten it one day. All right, now if you have a lining, again, this may not be relevant to you. If you have a lining and you are not planning on doing a skirt lining, you could simply turn it under like this and then sew it to that bit of seam allowance where we've joined the waistband to the skirt. And that would be finished. I'm not going to do that though, because I'm going to add a lining to my waistband lining. So are we finished? No, we're not. This is what's coming up. You see that full lining peeking out underneath my skirt? That's what I'm going to be talking about next time. We're going to be solving some problems where I get my skirt to be nice and full like this. Because where we've left it today with that green jumper, you can see how sucked into the legs it is. I don't want it sucked in. I want it to be hanging swishy and full and lovely. So that's what we're going to do next week. Join us for slip skirts and of course enjoy your comfy life, and I'll see you next time. And if you want to subscribe right now, just click on my face that's appeared and that'll get you subscribed.